Excuse me, Mr. DJ.
Hey, check this out. We got a great show coming your way.
From the ECSI Sports Studios, it's the Midday Market Report with Jeff Dawson.
Good afternoon, sports fans from all around the globe. I am the host / co-host here, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors. It's Friday. You survived another week. September 15th for all the East Coast guys, the locals, Hurricane Lee heading down the coast. Just a tropical storm warning for the Cape. Some heavy wind gusts, some rain, yada, yada, yada. Thank God it wasn't a direct hit. It is the Dawg and Desperados fantasy football show. It's Friday. It's 1 o'clock. Episode 9, I think. And one full week in the books. Thursday night, last night, Philly beats Minnesota for fantasy players. Jalen Hurts, DeAndre Swift. Let me see. Who else had a good game? Jordan Addison had a good game. Devontae Smith. Goddard had a handful of catches, was nowhere to be found last week as we went through the Millie. Shawn and I today will take a look at the first week. The hits, the misses, get everyone up to speed for the second week. Shawn survived a full week in Vegas, so not going to pull out and produce a full Millie team this week, but we'll get you through some quarterbacks, some running backs, maybe some wide receivers. Shawn's still going through the work there, but good show coming up today. So grab your lunch, grab your coffee, grab your notebook and pad, ask away if you got any questions. That's what we're here for, to answer them away. So without further ado, let's bring in Mr. Hall of Famer himself, the one and only Mr. Shawn Childs.
Jeff, 3 more days of the Cut Line Championship.
Yeah, let's talk a little about that. Season-long Cut Line, one of the leagues and contests that Greg Ambosis and the NFBC offer. Give everyone a little talk about the structure, the start, what that's all about, and where you stand with 3 days to go.
It's a best ball draft of 42 rounds. You can structure it however you want. You got to start 14 players for hitters, 9 for pitchers. So you try to ultimately get coverage at least 3 players a position, and maybe hopefully get 10 options in the outfield. Maybe if somebody qualifies a couple positions and something like that. So your best gets generated by points. So the best players get put in, as the days rotate during the week. And the pitchers, the same thing with points. There's 2 waiver periods, one like a week after the start of the season. So anybody that drafts early can clean up any injuries. And then there's one more, I think, in early June. And then you got to make it the rest of the season with whatever you got left. So once you survive, and after the All-Star break, there's like 3-week runs. And if you survive the cut, you make it to the final 20 teams, and one of the final 20 teams have a chance to win $75,000. With 8 days to go, I was in first, faltered really on like 2 days in a row. And then the Monday of this week, somebody scored like 200 points. I had like 100. So I've been kind of chasing my tail all week. So entering the weekend, I'm about, I guess 70 or so points behind, maybe a little bit more. Vlad Sedler, FTN guy, second place. Really pushed himself. He's relatively close. I think he's within 20. And he yesterday he didn't have the Dodger players playing, which would have helped him. He's got 4 guys on the Dodgers, but he has Lewis of Minnesota has been phenomenal, and Glass now pitching really well, potential doubles. But this is almost like a fantasy football thing. We got 3 days of action, and your team needs to be good for 3 days, and it doesn't matter if you have stars or not. It's whoever produces on the field, and you can score 150, 200 points in a night. So even though you're behind by 70, you can make up a lot of ground. Even in a football week, the last Sunday of the year, if you're 50 behind, you're probably still in range if you can knock home a 200 or so. So we'll see. I think I got 7 pitchers over the weekend. I need to improve on at least 5 or 6 spots in my lineup, and hopefully hit a lot of home runs. But first place is 75,000, second's 15, fourth is 10, sixth place where I'm currently sitting is 5,000. I'm hoping to at least get in the top 4. Second to fourth would be okay for my investment purposes of fantasy football, but we cannot control the outcome of the game. The players do.
So where you are 6th and looking from the top 4, we talked a few days ago where after that gentleman that had the 150, 200 point Monday, and you go from 1st to 6th, but you had said you were like 40 points or 50 points out of 2nd. So where you are now positioned to the top board, where do you sit from, let's just say 6th to 2nd and then 6th to 4th?
I'm probably only like within like 15, 20 points of like 4th and even 2nd. I think Vlad jumped up there. I'm probably like 50 behind him. I'm not sure how his lineup pitchers line up for the rest of the week. So that's kind of a big factor. I kind of got it, kind of caught a bad break last week on 2 players. Strider struggled and he's my ace, and he gave me a 0 game last week. So if he would have pitched well, he potentially could have gave me a 30 and maybe improved my team by like 20 points last week. And then in addition, he was supposed to pitch twice this week, and he could have gave me 2 good starts, and he got an illness, so he got pushed back to Wednesday. He got a 29 on Wednesday, but if I'd have got another 29, so that those little things kind of hurt you. And the other one was Mitch Keller, who actually was phenomenal yesterday, gave me a great game, but last week he was supposed to pitch on Wednesday. They pushed him back till Friday. He faced Atlanta, got drilled. So I got he would have got double starts as well this week. So I did get the great start this week. At least him and Strider back-to-back gave me some good pitching scores. So I would say that I'm within striking distance for sure of catching Vlad, but I don't know for sure if his pitchers are better. He's got a really good hitting team. The Dodgers, like you said, he has a lot of them. If they're going into Seattle, and Seattle has a couple of young guys going, I don't know who the other third pitcher is, but he's facing Kirby and Gilbert on 2 of them, and I think I have both of the pitchers. So it's kind of my pitcher pitch good, I gain ground. If his hit batters hit my pitcher, then I lose ground. So it's a double hit that way. And his pitchers have technically smashed a few homers. I think somebody was pitching. That's hit 2 home runs off of somebody when they were playing, and I think it was I think it was a Strider game against the Dodgers a couple of weeks ago. I think Strider won the game, I think, or something like that, but he gave up home runs to Betts. And if he didn't, that swing is a difference in my favor. So, but we'll see. We'll just see what happens. I'd love to have something we could talk about next week, but you never know.
And you talk about that 35, 40, 50 points. I've numerous years, and I know you have too, been in that last game where you might have the quarterback and a wide receiver. You might have a defense and a wide receiver. And in your head, if you're within 30 or 35, you still have a realistic shot. Go back to last year, Kansas City and Buffalo was the game, and then that was the Damar Hamlin injury and a game that never got replayed. So everyone that was put into that spot, I mean, just Mahomes, Kels, Pacheco, McKinnon, then you look at Josh Allen, you look at Stephon Diggs, the defenses, yada, yada, yada. You got to the dance, you got to the altar, and then had it pulled right out of your legs.
Yeah, I mean, that was really unfortunate. I mean, there was that would have been a phenomenal, action game, hopefully. And the star players, most of the players in that game were in starting lineups. There's other weeks that, you don't have, there might be a quarterback and a one running back and, maybe 2 players on the other side. So it's not that much action. And then you never know who actually has them at the top of the standings. But in this case, there was a lot of players that were in play, a lot of movement in either direction. And, just probably hopefully we don't see that again. And it's just unfortunate that injury happened. And, it's bigger than the game and disappointing. And I think there's somebody that your longtime friend, Nelson Souza, was in great position, sat Pacheco probably at the last minute. I think that's what I heard, and put in Cook from Buffalo and
Cook.
took a zero, and he would have won $250,000 or something like that if he would have played the other running back. And that's tough to recover from. You don't get those opportunities often, and when you're there, hopefully you take advantage of them.
I think he had all week. He had the Kansas City backfield in there with McKinnon and Pacheco, and last minute pulled Pacheco for Cook, and then I think he needed like 9 or 10 points or something small from Cook, which most likely would have got. But yes, fantasy football and baseball can be a cruel sport, as we know. Week 1 in the books. Obviously, just looking at the long regular season, 14 weeks to get to the dance, 3-week sprint after that. A lot of low scores out there. Not if you didn't have Tua, if you didn't have Tyreek Hill, if you didn't have the Dallas D, and there were a couple other guys that had good weeks, you were probably looking at 80, 90, 100, 110, 115s. I didn't see a lot of 200, 220s out there. Assess the first week, Shawn, of the regular season fantasy.
I think overall, I think the quarterback position from star perspective and even tight end position kind of really was disappointing. We had a couple of tight ends get scratched, Andrews and Kelsey, and then Kittle, who I actually didn't play, and go there from Philadelphia, really didn't do much, and some other tight ends didn't, and some of the other ones popped up there. We had Joe Burrow have probably his worst game of his career. Multiple quarterbacks that were started had disappointing weeks. So those are when your quarterback doesn't do well, that's pretty much a big hit, because you're pretty much counting hoping that guy gets 20 to 30 points, depending on the format. In the NFFC, it's 6 points per pass and touchdowns. The other one's 4. So I think 20 points out of quarterback is kind of what you're hoping for, a starting point. And if you have a good one, you're hoping for them to beat it. Last night Cousins had 33, whatever yards and 4 touchdowns. And I think he probably was well into the 40s in the NFFC. So quarterback's a big foundation player, and you need them to play well. And if he doesn't play well, obviously the receivers that go along. And then I know that you have talked about this before the draft season and during the draft season, and you probably talked about it all week, is that, T. Higgins, he just, puts up a 0, and last year he did a couple times. Really good player, but, he falls into that, no trust zone. And especially when it's a healthy 0, and it's really not, is it really his fault when the quarterback passes for 82 yards? Not really, but, stuff like that, just, you need to make up for it. And you almost need, now you need that guy to get a 30 to make up for last week. And does this week's matchup present that opportunity?
No, it doesn't. 3.5 point favorites against the Baltimore Ravens. So, last night, you talked about it. Kenneth Gainwell is scratch. In comes DeAndre Swift. Now, it was funny, as we were drafting in July and August. By mid to late August, he was sitting there 7th, 8th round in some drafts. It was just like one of those, do I take him and then come right back around and grab Gainwell? It was a wishbone offense if you looked at it. Opening game against the Patriots, they scored 16 points in the first 7-8 minutes, and it looked like they pulled the plug. And again, first half last night, just not what we were expecting or hoping. A.J. Brown, the passing attack, Devontae Smith, Goddard, et cetera. And then second half, there was 21 points scored in the first 5 minutes. Jalen gets his, Devontae Smith gets his, A.J. Brown, 4 catches, touchdown called back. On the Minnesota side, Addison scores. Jefferson, huge game, fumbles at the 1 going in, doesn't score. Assess last night's game, Shawn.
I think the biggest thing for Philadelphia was out of the gate. The Vikings defense, doesn't project well, as a top defense in the NFL. Philadelphia is supposed to have a really good offensive line. You expected them to have, time to throw and, have success running the ball. They tried to throw the ball, and they really didn't, the execution and the blocking was really poor out of the gate. and there was multiple turnovers in the game. So kind of put them in, where they had to rebuild what they wanted to do, and which they did was, they really focused on the run game and, take the, 4 or 5, 6 yards of rush, move the chains and just, kind of reestablish themselves. And once that started to happen, it opened up some things in the passing game. So, they ran the ball well. They look better. They're, when they get close to the goal line, at that 1 yard line, they're really tough to stop. I know people complain about it, but this is the NFL. You got to stop the play. Somebody's got to figure out how to stop them from doing it. And, if they're doing it, maybe somebody else should be trying to do it. But overall, I think Philadelphia, showed progressions. And like you said, late, they tried to get Brown a touchdown and made some big plays. And I think they'll be okay. I was really impressed with the Vikings, the offensive lineman being up. Philadelphia's supposed to get, they had a ton of sacks last year. They put some pressure on, but, Cousins was able to make a couple of big plays. And he got his 364 or whatever yards he ended up with, and he got 4 touchdowns. And, I had Cousins rated high this year, and I held him on a lot of teams, so I was happy with that. And he's a game that some people would actually sat him, and but you missed that game as kind of a missed opportunity. So overall, I think I like what I see of the Vikings over the first 2 weeks. I wish they would have done a little bit better against Tampa and won the game, but they're 0-2, and but their offensive firepower there is pretty impressive. At least passing the ball, maybe not running it.
And that's where I was going. And again, I didn't talk Hawkinson, 2 touchdowns. Or a lot of, if I remember correctly, Kels, Andrews, Hawkinson, Kittle. But as we progress, Hawkinson, the 3rd tight end off the draft boards there. 2 scores there. One guy I stayed absolutely away. I wanted 0 part of. And again, long season ahead. I just didn't see it. How many times have we seen the guy groomed to take over the lead spot and then get that opportunity and succeed? And I'm talking about Mr. Mattson. Saw a lot of not so pleasant tweets on social media about everyone that started Mattson. Moving forward, is it a wait and see, or RB1 got to play him, or are you looking for better options moving forward? Maybe a flex spot till he gets rolling, or is he a bench spot?
He was a player I did not draft. I thought he was in a tricky spot where he was unproven as a full-time starter. He was getting drafted as though he was the replacement for Cook. He had 47 catches last year, averaged less than 7 yards a catch. Those last 200 carries, it was under 4 yards a carry. Didn't look explosive. I know he had some decent games as a replacement for Cook over the last couple of years, but, when he's got to have the role, if he struggles, somebody else gets to step in and get the job. So I think that he's okay. And if he gets a volume of touches, he'll get his chances. I think that the Vikings will score most of their touchdowns via the pass. The second running back, Chandler, really didn't get many chances, but the couple he did, he looked like he might be the better player. But, we have to see that, overextended a number of plays and hopefully see something. So I if you have him, you kind of have to deal with him as an RB2 if you took him that high. But it's tough scraping the waiver wire now and finding a replacement, other than if some other situation has an injury and somebody pops up. But that player most likely is going to be expensive to buy, at least in our fab process in the high stakes market.
All right. Again, as I started in the preempt here, week 2 DraftKings in the Millie, with your schedule this week, we're unable to get to that actual lineup that we put up last week, but you've gotten through the quarterbacks, you've gotten through the running backs, and you're in the wide receivers now. So for everyone watching and listening, give them what's up, Michael Dombrowski.
Big city.
Mr. Bloom has left Mr. Bloom has left the building, so maybe we have a chance with our Red Sox next spring, but we'll get plenty of time to talk about that. Come winter stove meetings, hot stove meetings, whatever it is. But give us what you've seen so far in the quarterbacks, running backs, up to where you are in the wide receivers, some of the matchups, and just where you are right now. As it's Friday, we still get time to put in our lineups for Sunday.
Yeah, I did in 3 tiers, like a top tier, mid tier, and value tier this week for the quarterbacks. In the past, I would kind of run through all, I think there's 12 games, no, maybe it's 11 games on Sunday because there's a doubleheader on Monday night. So I would write all the quarterbacks and, some have at least a look at what they did, because you really want to uncover every little stone you can when you're doing the DFS market. But anyways, at the top end, I mean, you thought Josh Allen, after struggling against the Jets, coming home against the Raiders, potentially high scoring game, he would bounce back in a big way. So he's up, his salaries, 7,900. When you're at DraftKings, when they're that high, you need them to score, 4 times their salary. So I have him projected for 34.54, just behind Hurts, who did not get the extra touchdown, probably to get him in range last night, and did not pass for enough yards, but he did score the 3 touchdowns. But anyways, Allen, he's active runner, can score on the ground and stuff like that. Diggs looks good. Kind of concerned about, Gabe Davis. Is he going to be able to emerge? He's, didn't do much against the Jets the first game, and their tight ends are probably key to Kincaid, offering the most upside. So that's kind of a key player. But when you're looking at Allen, you do have one of his tight ends. Kincaid's 3,300 and Knox is 3,100. So you do get a kind of a cheap back there position. And I actually did Diggs, and Diggs, you like that he jumped out of the gate well after, what happened last year. And then last year, in the second week of the season, he had like this monster game where he had 3 touchdowns. And it came after, a good game in week 1. So potentially his matchup could be favorable for him. So, I mean, to get Allen, Diggs, and one of the tight ends in is probably, that's about 17,000. It's about a third of your salary. So you work the rest of the roster in there that way. So, Allen sticks out first. Geno Smith is, last year they played Detroit. I think that game was 48-45. I think Seattle won that game. And Amon St. Brown didn't play. But, they got some offensive tackle or offensive line issues in Seattle. They didn't look good. And a lot of times when you look at the DFS market, you look for somebody to play well the previous week. And it's almost like kind of got this thought process of 2-game winning streaks, especially if the second game is at home. And so Geno, he does have the potential receivers. I did ride him last week. It was disappointing. He's 6,100. Actually, he was 6,100 last week. He's 5,900 this week. So I think that he falls in a range where, he gets a couple of touchdowns at 300 yards. He would work. And then you had him last week. So I most likely will have him in the $20 million maker, but not in the single lineups in some fashion. The most interesting player to me is Burrow, because he was so bad last week, and last year against the Ravens. I think he had 3 games against them, under 240 yards, combined yards in each game, and he had 2, 1, and 2 in each of he had like only 1 passing touchdown in each games, and he had 1 rushing in 2 of them. So when you look at last year, it's like he did horrible against the Ravens. He's coming off a bad week. And then, Higgins is doing nothing. But when you look at Chase, he was pretty active last week. He was 7 for 50 and maybe 8 for 94 and a touchdown, and 8 for 86 and a touchdown. He didn't make plays, which kind of falls on their offensive line doing something. So I think that kind of he's the player that's kind of be against the grain. Obviously he's getting paid a ton of money, and he expect big things. And will he rebound? Most probably would like to see it. And I think his left tackle is questionable to play. So there's a lot of things working to favor him. But 2 years ago, I think he had that 400 yards in a couple of big games against the Ravens. So Ravens cornerback Humphreys doesn't look like he's going to play. They lost their starting safety. So if the Ravens put pressure on Burrow, it might help the Ravens to slow him down. But if they don't get to him and he has a long enough thing, he's going to be able to make some plays. So I think the Burrow combination is kind of an interesting, play where, when you put in your lineup, you don't feel good about it. You know what I mean? But it has the potential. Any thoughts on that so far?
No, that's the hardest part. What, not even talking regular season, but fantasy. You talked about Geno. I know Geno and Seattle laid an egg in the second half. They moved the ball pretty decently in the first half. They're still in the locker room. They got blitzed by the Rams, which, you know, I know the Rams are playing the 49ers this week, but I mean, who had Puka? Who had, I know the fact that there was no cup and they looked so bad in the preseason, right? But, Puka and Tutu Atwell, with Stafford, some of the low hanging fruits that I never even thought about, yada, yada, yada. I like the Geno look. I like the DK look. I like the Lockett look. Uh, so you take a Cincinnati and Burrow, who, when you were watching that game, Shawn, they were getting to him. It was a bad conditions. It was wet. It was rainy. It was almost like throwing it into the dirt. Both quarterbacks looked bad. So I guess my question to you and everyone watching and listening is, when you wake up Monday morning and you check your sheets, did I cash? Did I not cash? Is it almost like grabbing a bottle of ammonia, taking a big sniff of it, cleaning the head, and it's a new week? Or do you look at something like Joe being discounted this week for how bad that they looked and their opponent?
I'm gonna reference last year when you say this, because beginning of the year, I really, when you're throwing, single lineups in your, you got to pick one lineup. I mean, you're playing against, 5,000 teams in a single lineup sometimes, and you need that lineup to be the best, and you can't diversify. I mean, you can look like, you don't know what you're talking about a lot, right? But you only need to be a contender a few times a year, and if you knock it home, you could be a star and, really be a difference maker, but it's not going to happen that often. But, I used, Justin Fields last year, a couple times early in the year, and it would maybe more in the, the $20 $1 million maker game, and you mix them up and you get these really terrible scores when, he doesn't pass for many yards and he doesn't get many touchdowns. And then, you kind of go back to him, and then you keep him in the back of your mind, and, his salary kind of fades off in the sunset where it's favorable. So, you, like you said, you just have to, I don't want to be sitting here like, oh, let's do the show again. Let's talk about Geno and whatever again. You kind of like, oh, they said that last week, rinse and repeat, where, well, sooner or later, if you stay consistent, I reference it this way. You and me have been longtime dog track people, right? And when you go to the dog track, you have kind of different styles of play. You could be a guy that likes this early speed. I could be the guy that likes the class, the best dogs, like A dogs that drop down, double grades. So that's what I'm saying, class. So if he's running a double dropping grade, they're going to bounce back, but they tend to be favorites. Or the closers. But whatever style you pick, right, they're going to come in a certain percentage of the time. And if you're consistent with what you want to do, you're going to put yourself in a position at least some sort of percentage of the time. So which is the best way to go? And what, but at the same time, if we go to the dog track and we're handicapping 12 races, they're all different. Sometimes we're going to like somebody off that are long shots, and there's going to be sometimes we're going to like favorites. And each board each week is going to be a little different. So you try to be fair handicapping it. But also we're at the mercy of the salaries trying to put the puzzle together, which is sometimes difficult, especially if you're looking to fill in the last couple of spots with sub $4,000 players. It makes it really difficult to get that player right because they're priced that low for a reason. So in this particular case, like I said, last week was last week. You evaluate what happened. In the case of Seattle, Seattle's defense, which we expected to be poor, and the other team to score, which would be helpful for Seattle because they got to throw. But when they can't get the other team off the field in the run of the ball, they can control the clock. They don't get the ball back, and it ends up going sideways, and that's what happened with the Rams. So their defense was part of the problem, but also, Geno and them have to make a few more first downs and score some touchdowns to create a little more drama on the scoreboard. So, but, Lions, they very well could go into Seattle, and Lions defense, could, manhandle them, and Hutchinson get to Geno, and it's the same. Detroit's a lot better team. Like, wow, this team's got to be a contender. Knocked off Kansas City. They beat Seattle 34-14. or it could be, Seattle plays a lot better offensively because they ran the ball well and they do have, pretty good receivers. So, but anyway, so, that's kind of like the same thing with, you're looking at, the Bengals, can they bounce back? They were supposed to be a great team. Obviously the Bengals, paid them a ton of money. It comes back. But when you're looking at the court, it all starts, whatever you're building for your team, what quarterback can you use? And, you're trying to find 1 to 2 receivers with him. And is there a wide receiver on the other side? And then is it priced low enough to get star power at, the extra receiver or even one of the running backs? And that usually is more helpful as the season goes. Because realistically, who was the best? What was the best combination and best option to play at quarterback in week 1 in the daily market?
Well, without having the prices in front of me, I mean, I don't know if this is a trick question, but I would assume Tua to Hill was the combination last week.
Tua to Hill was the combination, but the combination that got you the best room to execute was actually Mac Jones, who was drafted last almost in all leagues. His salary is around $4,000. You paired him with Hunter Henry, and then you could have paired him with Kendrick. You would have basically, I think, those 3 players would have been about 11 or 12,000, and they would have got. When you're looking at that, they got to get. If they get 4 times their salary, that's a lot. So Jones threw for 3 touchdowns and 300 yards. So he's got. I think he was the highest scoring quarterback on the week, and that's not even counting the 3-point bonus for things. So he got like 30 points. Bourne had well over 20, and the tight end 70. They had like 70 points. It's like almost like 6 times. So you got that. So I actually was putting on the right. Last week. I was entering the lineups, putting the quarterbacks with their hookup. So I had Mac Jones with Hunter Henry, and I was using Jefferson, Chase, Metcalf, and I put in Michael Thomas because I liked him at the flex. But the thought process was there. I just needed to have more teams in the $5 game to mix it up. And if you could have cycled through the 6 or 7 star players and then filled in the blanks, you might have been a contender. I didn't look at what ended up winning the $1 Million Maker and stuff like that to see it was. But the only thing I would say that the defense that you expected, like on Sunday, like Washington didn't do what was expected. They were a top thing, and they did nothing. Actually, Arizona was, probably the defense. They were relatively cheap, and they played pretty well. So, like I said, so you're looking for, low value hookups, and like Mac Jones doesn't look like much, but who's this week's Mac Jones? Is there somebody that is, or maybe this is a week where the Josh Allen, they whitewash, Raiders, and they beat them, 35 to something, score 5 touchdowns. So that's a lot of stuff you're thinking about when you're doing the daily stuff, and and that's where we're at least at the quarterback and early wide receiver stuff.
Shout out to Stu Bunting. Big fan. Thank you, Stu, for all your trust and support. I just gave you a little ha-ha over there. Cobbles Beach, Craigville Beach, wide open. No lines in the parking lot this weekend. And I assume the same way with Mr. Shawn Kroll in the Hyannis Golf Course. I drove by there today, earlier this morning, and there were people out there trying to get their round in before Hurricane Lee or Tropical Storm Lee, whatever. So, Stu, thank you. Behave yourself. Have some fun this weekend. Shawn, just looking at the, this week's games, going off of what you're talking about, Chargers, Titans, I was pretty impressed with the Titans defense. They should have won the game outright. I still will say Derek Carr, that was an open hand fumble that their defense picked up and ran back for a touchdown that would have put them up 10. Should have won that game outright. Green Bay at Atlanta. Aaron Jones hasn't practiced all week, so I'll get to your thoughts. If he doesn't play, are you going to move in A.J. Dillon for a cheaper price there? Bijan looked good. Algier stole the touchdowns there. Indy and Houston. Richardson looked okay. Michael Pittman with a busted coverage, big touchdown there. Seattle at Detroit, under over a 51. And currently on my board, that was the opening number. It's down to 47, but for actual under overs, Patriots Dolphins at 46.5. Baltimore, Cincinnati, 46.5, Shawn. So they're expecting points there. Vegas Bills, 47, and Chargers, Titans at 46 there. Kansas City and at Jacksonville, 10 days off to get ready there. I expect a lot of people thinking a lot of points there. Giants at Arizona is a 39.5. 49ers at the Rams, 44.5. Jets in Dallas, 38.5. Everyone play the Dallas D because of what they saw in Zach Wilson. Well, just remember, Dak Prescott is a interception machine as well, and defenses do travel there. Washington at Denver. I don't think a lot of people on there. And then, of course, the night game, Miami at New England. So wide receivers, A.J. Dillon, injuries. Where are you right now?
I think the trick was when you do the projections and, which you kind of fit in the offensive profile, and the only thing I look at the playing time and the snaps, and you try to figure out, okay, Stevenson and, Elliott, or how they split them. And you try to give a fair evaluation, but at the same time, you're going to get some number, is that, so that'll say say in New England matchup that they, that matchup says they're going to score 0.71 touchdown. So then most likely I either make it, I'll round it to 3/4 or 1, or down to a half. And then it'll kind of slip into the, whatever the split is at the running back position. So when you're looking at just go down the board for, the rankings anyways. And it's not so much of what they, McCaffrey is what he is. He's facing the Rams. He can do it all. He was on the field 85% of the time. He's a stud, but he's almost 9,000. He needs 36 points. He played really well last week, had a great game, but he didn't reach that. But he does fall into that difference maker piece to the puzzle. So if you can find enough value, Derrick Henry, he's reliant on touchdowns to kind of do it. He makes plays, got enough yards last week, but he got outsnapped by Spears. Not that Spears only, stole much from him. He only had 4 touches, but he was on the field. But the Chargers, will give up some rushing yards like that. So I think that matchup's okay, but he'll get a couple of catches. Pollard kind of makes a lot of sense. Playing the Jets, a good defense, but if he catches some balls and he scores a touchdown, they get the short field. There's potentially that, where he's 7,500. If he gets, 22.5, it's probably 3 times his salary. Kind of keeps the game. If he gets a second touchdown, breaks 100 yards, he's kind of worthy of being at. Barkley, will he bounce back? Arizona, really good matchup. Really didn't show much. Doesn't give it, does that get you enough excitement? Thing. It's kind of Stevenson just hasn't. He's a good player, and he had the catches last week. Didn't run the ball well, but so far with New England, he hasn't scored a lot of touchdowns. And you really need touchdowns in the DFS market to have difference maker in the season long games. I mean, you can still get the 15s and be steady, and you'd be happy when they get a touchdown once in a while and get 20s. But when you DFS, you really need that guy to kind of pop. And I don't, Stevenson's kind of falls in that questionable. Is that? And you said that was a late game, so he's off the main slate anyways. Bijan showed his, what he could do, but the other guy's in the way, and you didn't like that the goal line stuff that they used Algier. So it's kind of like I like Bijan at the similar price last week, but this week I'm not as confident that he's going to get in close. So that's kind of gets him a knock. Not that so, but I think he falls in the explosive category. We got Jacobs playing in Buffalo, really good matchup. Touched the ball a ton last year, scored touchdowns, will catch passes. Buffalo should score. He'll have some chances. I think Garoppolo threw the ball well enough. So I think he makes a lot of sense because now his salary is 7,100. So he's ranked, or in the projections, he's 2-4. He's like the 7th or 8th running back at DraftKings, but his salary is 7,100. So I think he has a potential to maybe do something. So Jacobs is kind of in my thought process. Not that I can, pay that much for him, depending on how I structure it, especially if I end up doing the Bengals. Then we go to Chubb, great player, played well, liked what he saw last week. They ran the ball well. Going into Pittsburgh, not the best matchup for him, but he's still priced like he's a 32-point guy. He needs to get 32. Chubb, historically, for being with Cleveland, even if when Hunt was on the field and now he doesn't have him to compete, they still rotated Ford in a little bit last week. He doesn't score 30 points a lot. he can have those games. He gets 100 yards, a couple of touchdowns, and maybe he gets a couple of catches. Maybe do it once, maybe twice a year, but it doesn't really come in that much. So seems a little bit high. And then we go down to Gibbs. How many touches did he have last week? He was on the field minimal, amount of time. He had 60 yards and 2 catches. Disappointing, but the matchup is really, really good. And his salary is $6,300, which realistically is overpriced for what he's done. And you're kind of betting on the come. So, when you're looking at him, he falls into the explosive category in the matchup, like you said, high over under. So he's tempting, but not a lock. And realistically, when we talk about that 2-game winning streak, Montgomery, did enough. And his salary's a couple, $300 or $400 less. Maybe you should just ride Montgomery and go back with him. But one of the Lions running backs, has a chance to score 20 points this week. And both of them need to, I think Gibbs would need about 25, and I guess maybe 24. So, one of them's going to have to. But I think, Gibbs has that chance to pop the long run. So, but he also gives you that boom or bust feel, more of a millionaire maker thing, more than a single lineup type of thing. But, when you're looking at the inventory, it's kind of tricky. Now, Mixon goes into, he's facing the Ravens, and they do use their running backs around the goal line. So I think that he does the stuff, any potential, but last year he did not have that many big games. He had that one 55-point game, which was insanely out of line for what he did, but it was a game that I was fortunate to be part of. But he's still a pretty good player, and he's going to get enough touches. And there's not really a lot of competition behind him. I thought ETN looked pretty good last week. Bigsby stole the touchdown, right? But he was on the field 80% of the time. He got 5 catches. He broke a run for a touchdown, which he has that capability. He's 6,900. So I think Jacksonville's improving offense, playing Kansas City, potentially be high scoring. He checks a lot of boxes again. Last week he scored 21. He needed to get like 28, same price point. I think the game makes a lot of sense there. So, so I think he probably has to be in the mix. So right now I would think price rise and stuff like that. And, Jacobs and him, Gibbs is a flyer. And people are going to gravitate to Rashad White, 5,500, playing Chicago, bad against running backs. But, he gained, less than 6 yards a catch last year, less than 4 yards per rush. And they gained 2.6 yards per rush last week. And they gained, I think Mayfield gained like 5.2 yards per pass attempt. So, okay, he had 19 touches and it is a favorable matchup. I can't eliminate him. And if he scores a touchdown, it fits, right? Because he only needs 21 points. I don't think he gets 100 yards, but I could see him getting 5 for 50, catching the ball and getting 1 touchdown and potentially get, some rushing yards. So I can't eliminate him. So if I got a structure of a team, I can't dismiss him. And then we got A.J. Dillon. We talk about, obviously, with Aaron Jones, if he doesn't play, he gets a bump. Probably mix in somebody else. We'll catch a few balls. Matchups probably okay against Atlanta. But I don't consider Dillon explosive as far as like making big plays, but he's a like kind of power back, and he will be a factor at the goal line and stuff like that. So, and then the next one's James Cook. Kind of, I would say the way they used him in the first week, I'd be happy they wait, for Cook. And then you got them playing in a game where they potentially could score like 5 touchdowns. You would think that he would get, a chance at 1, maybe at least, right? And he has kind of that skill set where he could pop a 50-yarder. He was, they didn't, we're not sure what happens at the goal line if they use Harris. And we got the quarterback that could snipe it there too. So that's the trick with Cook. But at 6,100, he's probably a better option than Gibbs because that he's the lead guy based on his usage last week. And he checks those, explosiveness, and now I would think that they're going to score a lot of touchdowns. So Cook would be viable. So how's this train of thought for the running back? Is that 2? And is it okay, or is it just?
No. That's fine. No, it is fine. And again, with not all your work done, pretty impressive. All as always. What I'll do here is we're 45 minutes deep. I'm gonna just cherry pick your brain here on the tight end situation. Just going off of under overs and just in my head matchups here. I think after what everyone saw, Laporta will be a name that I don't have a salary in front of me. I will say maybe on the cheap Komet, you talked about the two Buffalo tight ends with Knox and Kincaid. We assuming maybe Kel starts. That's the assumption. Ingram, couple catches, showed some flashes. I don't know if Andrews is playing. I think Waller will be a name. He says he's going to play. Everyone might gravitate to. You talked about Kittles. And let me look down the board, and that game's off. Did I miss anyone?
Well, I would think Andrews coming off the injury, you're kind of not sure. But if that game goes back and forth, he potentially could be in the mix, but we don't know his usage. What was the other one? Kelsey he's 7,600 coming off an injury. If that game's high scoring, he needs 30-point game. So I would probably lean towards, not fighting for him. But also when you put the tight end in there, there's so many, like you said, Laporta's 3,900 and needs 16 points. It allows more flexibility when you when you got to find a running back value, it's a lot harder. You can find it kind of like you could put three teams in the $20 game at the $1 million maker and rotate in three back end tight ends and you might hit it. But you try to rotate in three back end running backs at 4,000, you might never hit it. There's once in a while that somebody gets a job and they might do something. So it's a little more challenging there. And the wide receivers, the low end is 3,000. So once in a while, the 3,000 receivers last week, the Mims and the Reeds, they didn't come in. It was the Rams guys that nobody was talking about. Mm-hmm. I mean, I did mention Kendrick Bourne as potentially could surprise too. And I know you've been, preaching him in the off season. So, but as like Kincaid's got a shot. I think Kittle could bounce back, but Kittle's, when he was with Brock Purdy, his success is a lot of touchdown driven. I don't think he's going to get as many targets as he did in the past because now they have three good receivers, but he can have once in a while a game that could be impactful. I think Everett's the one that's kind of sneaky a little bit. He didn't last year. I think his ticket for his salary his salary is 4,100. So he needs like 16. I think he only one time he got, above that last year, but if Austin Eckler doesn't play, and I don't think he plays, and so I think that creates some opportunities for somebody else, and it might get shifted to him. So he could surprise, maybe score a touchdown. Tennessee was bad against tight ends, and they were bad against wide receivers last year. So there's a couple positives for that, and maybe I should be, hearing the voice for me saying that maybe the quarterback everybody was talking about, over the summer, hey Bear, we should be looking at him, right? And it was interesting last year when I went to that DFS final. I think it was that game Tennessee was playing the Chargers, and then Henry ended up doing something, but the passing game was nothing. It was worthless in the last year. So but so like I said, Everett, Laporta, 5 for 5, 5 targets, 5 catches last week, 39 yards. It was active, looks pretty good. Waller coming off the injury makes sense with the hookup, but he's priced to like a 22-point player. And the rest of them are kind of like, I think anybody later that you're looking at makes more sense if you're playing a quarterback, if you're taking a shot and pairing somebody up and you're trying to cheat it. I mean, I guess, that's probably the angle that you would look, but so Laporta, Everett makes sense, Kittle possibly, and then the Buffalo tight ends. And then, like I said, the rest is a matter of hookups for me.
So we wrap this up, Shawn. Is everyone just going to go run to the window and play the Dallas D with Zach Wilson coming into town? Or is there someone there, just looking, again, I says the Jets D is going to travel just as well. Let me see here. Green Bay defense, maybe against Ritter. People might flock to the Tampa D and say Justin Fields doesn't do anything. The Buffalo D against Jimmy G. Take a swing with the Giants D against Dobbs. And I'd say that's probably it.
Yeah, they're the defense for me. I settled on Washington. They didn't do good last week, but the defense this week is a lot more difficult. Even like Houston's playing Richardson, you figure Richardson's got to pass it, and Houston doesn't have a great defense, but they're priced up. They're like 3,600 at DraftKings. I don't know what they are at FanDuel, but they're making it harder to fit in. You're giving up $1,000 salary, which is from 4,000 to 5,000 at a receiver position is a lot, and even in some of the differences at running back. So the defenses, I haven't got my head wrapped around it. I think like the Giants thing kind of makes sense a little bit. Bounce back game against the quarterback, but that didn't work out so good against Washington. I used that same theory at home, but I mean, I know Young didn't end up playing for their defensive end for Washington. That was a factor. But I would think I kind of really was thinking like the Lions could be sneaky because the Lions defense could, maybe score a touchdown and get some stuff, but they also could give up a lot of points. Hutchinson's a pretty good player and stuff like that. So I thought they, played pretty good against Kansas City, but they will give up, because you could get that negative point stuff if they do it, but they could be sneaky, and they were 3,000. So I gravitated them at first, and it was more so like who is a possibility, and who aren't people going to use too, but you get the mid case Atlanta, maybe Love turns it over too. Atlanta's played okay the first week. The game's at home. You like what you saw if they run the ball. But ultimately, I would say, especially in the single lineup, when you're doing like the, your best thing, the team that I did the best with last year, I had the Jets against Buffalo. They were $2,000, the cheapest defense on the board, but it made everything else work. And they got like 10 points for 2,000, which was 5-1, which is pretty good. And, that was just enough to, make it work. And, they helped, push the ball over the end zone. So I try not to get too stuck on the defense, but I know Dallas will be attractive. And like you said, the Jets, but, does the whole pieces to the puzzle fit, So you see those guys that did put a ton of teams and do really well. They kind of mix it up a little bit. They'll just put a defense in there and hope they get 10 points and not really like handicapping as much as more just sticking somebody in there, We have to shove when you're the little guys,
You got, as you were talking about our glory days at the track, and, we made sure we hit the all button. So that's what we need to do here. Week 2 in the books. The scroll has been going the whole time, Shawn. Obviously, we hope to do this every Friday. Maybe next week you get your sea legs under you. Maybe we'll have a mini lineup up there. But what everyone can do, if they were smart here, that have been watching, and a shout out to Stu, shout out to Mikey D, and a shout out to the Cape Connections, all on Facebook watching us, is tell them where they can get all your work. Tell them where they can subscribe. And maybe later this weekend, they will have that lineup that everyone's looking and searching for.
Yeah, I'm at Twitter, _Childs. I've been putting my content at Full-Time Fantasy. In addition, I've been starting my own site to try to see if I can build an audience. It's fantasyanalyst.substack.com. If you sign up for it and give you email, you'll get everything. When I make a post, it gets emailed to you. But ultimately, if you get the email, you should go further and get to the site and click on my picture and get there, because all this information's there and you can kind of see it a lot better. But it is also good to have that communication of the stuff coming in the inbox, and when something gets posted. So this video will most likely Jeff will have it up soon. I'll post it at 3:00 for today. And then I have the wide receivers. I think I got like 2.5 hours left. I'm not sure if I'll post. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'll post it tonight or tomorrow morning to go out at 9:00. And then I'll probably do even go over the, like I do like to do one underdog prop bet for 5. I might do that and throw that in there and maybe kind of recap what I'm seeing in the DFS as once you do the research for the DFS and you got an opinion of the player pool, you have to shove it in the box, and that makes it more difficult to put the pieces together. And sometimes the light bulb clicks. Oh, that's going to fit, and that looks good, and let's go with that. But you never know when it's going to be the best lineup. And at the same time, the projections will be updated tonight. Usually try to do it at the end of the day. I don't want to have, redo it and stuff like that. So I'll update those tonight for all the cheat sheets and stuff like that, and then kind of pay attention to the news on the weekend. So week 2, a good start with Cousins and a lot of teams, and hopefully we can have a phenomenal season-long football season, and we'll see what happens in the DFS market.
Well, again, all people back east, it's not going to be bad, but, get out on your decks, pull in the cushions, tighten up the barbecue grills, bring in any loose objects. You'll get some wind and rain, I think starting tonight into tomorrow. Just again, hopefully the internet and the power will stay afloat. I saw the Cape Cod Mall, the trucks already piling in. So they're expecting at least a little damage. We'll see what happens. So at 3:00, myself and Matt Grissom, 3 men in a box, talking some college football. 5:00, Mr. Ron live from LA, talking some college and some NFL. So for myself, Jeff Dawson at EC Sports Invest, Mr. Hall of Famer himself, Shawn Childs at Shawn_Childs at Fulltime Fantasy, and of course at fantasyanalysis.substack.com. We wish everyone a blessed afternoon. Have some fun. The weekend's here, guys. And we will